Hello and welcome to the office. In a recent video, I showed how I cut the same form into 8 different pieces of maple and then flipped them around and combined them in a way such that gives the illusion, and it is an illusion, that the pieces are woven in and out of one another. And this has been a pretty popular video for me. Over 300,000 views in the first couple weeks. That's quite good performance for one of my videos. So given that level of interest, I wanted to do a follow-up video. Lots of people were curious about this. How did you think of this? And why does it work? Well, nobody actually asked why does it work. But I want to explain why it's possible to do this. And I want to explain it in terms of symmetries of this piece. And by symmetries, I mean changes in orientation that you can do to this form that leave it the same. Now that definition of a symmetry, doing something to a thing and it remains the same as a definition of symmetry, that's something I learned from one of my favorite books, favorite lectures, and I'm going to tell you about it real quick here. This is 6 Not So Easy Pieces by Richard Feynman, and it's an incredibly thought-provoking lecture by a brilliant physicist who really did a good job presenting things and making complex concepts accessible. You don't need a physics background to get something from this. There will be parts of this book that you don't understand, but the first 2 chapters, especially on symmetry, are really fascinating, and I recommend it. Now, this is an Audible link that I'm including in the description for this book. Audible is not sponsoring this video, but it's looking like they're going to sponsor my channel in the future. So this seemed like a really good opportunity to tell you about one of my favorite books that I can recommend you listen to, and it pertains to the topic of symmetry that I'm going to use to explain why this thing is possible. Okay, so enough on that, let's get into it. So here is the finished form, and you'll see 2 lines here that represent the 2 axes of symmetry that I need to explain why it's possible to make 8 identical pieces and have them come together to form this guy. So just to illustrate, they're both 180-degree rotations. So if I use this axis and rotate around 180 degrees, it looks exactly the same. If I hit undo, nothing changes, because it's symmetrical around 180-degree rotation of that axis. Same exact thing for this top axis. Spin around 180 degrees. Looks exactly the same. Hit undo, nothing happens. Okay, so why is that useful? Well, let's explode this group. I'll grab just one piece and the axes and move them over. All right, so what does this allow me to do? So first of all, we're gonna copy this around 180-degree rotation on the axes of symmetry. Okay, looking good. Now we're gonna do the same thing with both these pieces around the center axis. Now I'm not changing these pieces, I'm just changing their orientation in space and their position in the overall piece. Okay, it's coming together, but it's still not complete. So I'm going to go back to the original and talk about one additional symmetry, and that's a symmetry within this form. I think it's pretty obvious, and I won't go into any kind of proof for why this piece is exactly the same as this piece 2 steps over. Since it's a repeating pattern, those 2 are going to look exactly the same. So it's pretty obvious that I can have the same piece here. I could use it again here. These would be interchangeable within the pattern. So I can use that, move this guy over, copy and move over. Same thing here. And exact same thing over here. Okay, so it's all the same piece. We just flipped it around and changed its position in the pattern, and it all comes together because of those 3 symmetries, the repeating pattern within the individual pieces and the 2 axes of symmetry. That's why this is possible. Now to the second question, how did I think of this? It wasn't thinking about symmetry. It wasn't anything this didn't all come together concisely in my head and then I went to the shop and made it. It was more, it started from this particular video that Izzy Swan did to make this pattern. And you should go watch it. It's a good video. And he uses a brute force method. He bends the forms, the kind of wavy individual patterns, and then cuts them apart and puts them all back together because you can't just force them together. Wood doesn't weave and move even after you've bent it. So if someone says, well, steam bending's the answer, think about it. Just saying steam bending doesn't solve all the problems of trying to get this together. But anyway, Izzy's video got me thinking about how this is an interesting pattern to make and also a very challenging one. It required this brute force approach by him to make it happen. So it was in the back of my mind that this was an interesting problem to take on. I didn't have any solutions. And then at some point, I sort of got the vague inclination that just having dados on either side and the two pieces coming together, it might be possible with just one form to have that all work, to have it all come together and mimic a woven pattern, even though the four pieces on top are just coming in straight from the top. But I didn't, it wasn't any more than just kind of a vague inclination that it was possible. I had to sit down with the CAD software and fiddle around with it and get it wrong a bunch of times and try different things and really get my head around how this could work before I actually got the pattern that did work. So that's really how it happens. I think that letting something churn in your subconscious and obeying a vague inclination that there could be a solution in a particular direction and trying to refine it, that's really the key. I don't think that I have all that much of a different mind than anyone else in this respect. It's just letting your subconscious chew on something and exploring an inclination that got me there. So that's my story as far as how this came together. As promised in the thumbnail, I am including a free template on my website that gives the exact dimensions that you need if you want to try this yourself. You need to make 8 pieces that are identical and have these cuts. All can be done on a table saw. And there's a link in the description to my website where you can get to the store and find that template. Now, good comment, someone asked, if all the dado cuts and angled cuts could be made on a large piece of wood and then individual slats cut from it afterwards. And I actually think that's a better idea if you have a piece of wood big enough to do it than what I did. Reason being is that because of the nature of the angles, you're cutting some on one side of the combined block and then you're flipping it all the way around. So if those two sides aren't parallel, then the cuts are a little bit off, and I ran into some of that and tuned it up with sanding, but I think starting from one block of wood initially would make it easier to get the sides parallel and not have so many of those issues and just have an easier cleanup once this all comes together. So I think it's a good idea if you have a big piece of wood. Now, I used maple because the grain is not very distinct and the grain is working against the illusion because it's all running the same direction. It doesn't follow the weave pattern. So finding a wood with less distinct grain would be a good idea to maintain that illusion. Let's see, what else? And if you do end up building one of these from the template, I'd be interested to see it. Send me a picture or tag me on Instagram or somehow get it to me. I think that'd be pretty cool to see what people can do. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.